My name is York Grow here at Duncan-Parnell. I want to welcome you to the next webinar here in our monthly asset management webinar series. We're glad you made time out of your day for this. We'll be looking at Trimble Unity and how it can assist in the asset or workflow work management cycles of information from the field to the office, to kind of give you an idea of some alternatives. There's lots of different tools out there these days, so we're going to give you a glimpse into Trimble Unity and its capabilities. This session will be recorded, as our other sessions have been as well. And the reason for that is so that if you miss something, you can go back and refresh it. You're also welcome to pass this webinar along to those you might think interested, and as well those folks that have signed up but were not able to attend today for some particular reason. They will also receive a link for this email as well. This webinar series will become, or this recording will become, part of our webinar series that we have available online for access to watch and view, and follow up with us if you do have any additional questions. We welcome your questions throughout the webinar. If you'll use the chat window, everybody is muted at the moment. So if you can use the chat window throughout the webinar, I'll be kind of monitoring that and pause for Daphne to answer those questions if she can, or then certainly at the end, we'll catch up with any of the questions that we haven't been able to answer prior to that. At the end of the webinar, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a verbal question rather than just using the chat window. But with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Daphne Brown. Daphne joined us recently back in September of last year. We're grateful to have her on the team. She's brought a great deal of knowledge, and I think what she's brought more to the team is just a tenacity to learn. So I appreciate her jumping in and diving deep in some of these topics that'll help us out and hopefully help you out as well. So Daphne, with no further ado, I'll turn it over to you. Daphne, you're still muted.
Okay, here we go.
There we go.
Okay. Well, thank you, York, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm a geospatial support and training specialist here at Duncan-Parnell, and my primary role is focused in Trimble Unity for remote monitoring and asset management. Prior to joining Duncan-Parnell, I worked at a small municipality as a GIS technician, and I'd like to share some of my experiences as a GIS technician because one of my main responsibilities was managing their utility database. So I can empathize with a lot of asset management challenges because there's so many different variables. I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here of just all the different things that you have to keep track of. It's going to create a lot of hectic things. So during my time as a GIS technician, we had two ways that we organized our work order system. One of those was through paper work orders. And with the paper work orders, that was functional. And it worked well. They would go out at the beginning of the week, but by the end of the week, then I would receive all the work orders back, and I would get this pile of work orders, and then I'd be copying the information and then entering in my database. And after about the 50th meter serial number that you're entering and all these other different attributes, the numbers can run a bit together. There's obviously room for human error. So that's something that I'm really excited to talk about today with Trimble Unity, and it being an app-based solution, and how it's going to cut out having your GIS technician or somebody else taking what's written on paper and trying to transcribe it, because oftentimes I would go through the initial process of entering this information, and then I would go back and double check. So it was creating more time, it was creating a lot more room for error rather than that information coming directly from the field back into the office. Another way that I worked with organizing asset collection was with field maps, and I enjoyed using field maps. It was really great for collecting data easily. Something that I always struggled with was a good way to organize in field maps. So if the field crew would go out into a certain area and collect assets in that area, but then while they were collecting, they got pulled away to an emergency maintenance routine or emergency maintenance situation, they'd be away. And then if they made a change, it'd be hard for me to tell what really occurred or where they finished and where they started back up again. Obviously zooming in on the points and being able to see there, but not having that definitive, are we missing data here, or is it an empty lot and there isn't meters, things like that. So that's something that with Unity, in Unity for asset management, it's going to have these really clear work orders that are going to give you those definitive answers that I was definitely lacking when I was working in the field maps. So my hope here is that if you can see yourself having these similar struggles, or if you have struggles of your own with how you're organizing your asset management, that hopefully by the end of today, you'll have a better understanding of how Trimble Unity can be able to help you. So what I'm going to do is break down Trimble Unity for work management into 3 key user roles. So my first one is going to be my GIS personnel. And what the GIS personnel are going to do is they're going to be the ones managing this database, getting it shared as a web map, and then integrating it into Unity, and then creating this work order application where they're going to be able to assign these work orders to the field crew. So that brings in my next field crew, or my next user type, which is the field crew. And they're going to be using Unity out in the field, and they're going to have access to work orders on hand. They'll be able to convey any information that they're collecting or anything that they run into, and that's all going to be set back in real time. And then my last user type that I'm going to talk about today is going to be either my utilities directors, or I've also lumped in stakeholders, anyone who'd be interested in seeing this final product, final version of what's happening. So they're going to see this by dashboards that have been enabled with the application. So those are going to be the 3 points that I'm going to talk about mostly. So we're going to get started with from GIS personnel and their workflow component. So I have here, if I was the GIS personnel, I've created this little made-up database out in Durham. And what I've done is I've had my assets here, and I've gone ahead and shared this as a web map in ArcGIS Online. So I have it as a web map. And then I have what's called single sign-on settings, and I've configured an ArcGIS connector in Trimble Unity, which is going to allow Trimble Unity to consume my ArcGIS Online content. So my web map that you just saw in Pro is now already built into my Trimble Unity instance, and I've gone ahead and already made an application. So with my sample data set that I've made in Arc Pro, I've shared it to a web map, and I've gone ahead. In this application, I like to title them by their asset type. So here I have hydrants. So everything in this application is going to be hydrant related. So I've got my data here, and if you notice on this panel right here, I can see the work orders that I've already assigned myself. And if I wanted to go through and sift them out by type, priority, the status of them, and who they're assigned to, I can apply all these different filters, or if I wanted to see when I did them, I can do that as well. And it's going to create a nice organization, or if I click on one of these icons here, it's going to tell me my work order information as well. So that's how I can, oh, there it is. So there's my work order information. So my main workflow component then for my GIS personnel is getting this data up and running and connected from ArcPro to Online to Unity. And what I really like from a GIS personnel perspective is it's creating a really nice flow of data. We'll get into how I can bring this data back into ArcPro, but it's a really nice way to organize what's happening. Is going to keep me in the loop as my field crew goes out and collects. I'm getting that back in real time, so it's not waiting till the end of the week so that it's going to be piled up as that that pile of paperwork orders that I would then have to be putting in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and show you how quick and easy it is to assign a work order. So I have got my hydrants here, and I'm just going to select this hydrant right here. So I'm going to say I want this hydrant, and I'm going to go ahead and create a work order. So I like to title them based on what I'm doing. So inspect, we'll just say inspect, and then I like to use the date. So we'll do 4 6. I think I already did one today, but I titled it a little bit differently. So then we're going to do a, let's see, sample hydrant inspection. So what's going on here is I've titled my work order. So when my field crew gets this, they're going to get a work order titled inspect_46. If I was working with a really large organization, I could break this down into different sections. And for type, this is the exact same thing. So what I've done is I've created what's called a workflow. And that is the exact same thing as those paper work orders that I mentioned, except with that paper work order, it's also giving it a sense of direction. So once I create this workflow type, it's going to say, I want you to open this work order, fill out this hydrant inspection, and then I'm going to close it. So that's what I've done. I've gone ahead and set the parameters for what it's going to be doing. So I've got it open in status. I'm not going to give a reason. Priority is going to be low. And I'm just going to go ahead and assign that to myself. And rather than manually entering this address, what I can do is go over here and drop a pin. So I selected this hydrant, so I'll just go and drop a pin there, use a location, and I've got my hydrant that's associated with this work order. So I'll be able to see which one I'm working with. And what I really like about this address function is when I get this work order, if I'm not sure where it is, when I click on the address, it's going to automatically open up Google Maps for me and route me to where I need to go. So it's going to cut down any confusion time for your field crew as well. So that's going to sum up my work order. It looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and select create. So now I can see that I have this work order. It's assigned to myself, and I know that it's about this asset right here. So what I'm going to do now is I have Unity in the mobile version, but on my computer. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull that up. So I had this inspection from earlier that I haven't completed yet. And I'm going to go ahead and trigger a sync. And when your field crew is looking at this, it's going to be a little bit different interface-wise on their handheld. So this is going to be their main screen. And it's going to create a nice look. So I get a nice notification that I got a new work order. So I can either look at my work orders like this in a list format, or I could switch to the map view. And if I wanted to knock these out, if I knew I had a bunch of work orders all in the same geographic region, we could just go through them that way as well. So got my nice work orders. Okay. And I'm just going to select this work order. And now I'm going to change my status to start work. And now that I've done that, it's automatically sending my information back to Trimble Unity on that web browser that we just were. And now anyone who wants to know where I am on the status of this can easily see that as well. So this is all the information that I filled out. There's also an option for notes. So if you were at a place and you needed to convey something about the location that they were going to, it'd be really easy to fill in information to just keep your crew informed. And I know since this is an inspection that it's already an asset in our system. So I'm going to go down to associated assets, and now it's going to prompt me to inspect that asset. So I'm going to go ahead and inspect it. I'm not near where I made my database, so I'm just going to go to the map function and just click on it there and confirm that. So that's going to take my location. If I did have a receiver connected, I could just go ahead and capture my location. And my asset ID has already auto-populated for me, and that's a huge feature that I really like is the default values. So what I've done is created it so that when I made this work order form, it's always going to automatically pull in this asset ID. So then later on, my GIS personnel will be able to use this asset ID to create related tables so that they can have the asset itself and then relate different inspections to that asset ID. And it's also something that I'm not then having to enter, and it's eliminating that risk of human error, mistyping something. It's going to keep it standard and keep it consistent. with what I'm going to need it later for when I relate it. So it's gone ahead and it's automatically taken my date of inspection. And I've made this a really simplified form just for this. It can be as complicated as you would like. And it can also have required fields. So if you want to ensure that you're getting a certain responses, certain level of data back, you can set those parameters so that you can ensure what's coming back to you is meeting what you need. So I can go ahead and say the paint is in good condition. It is, let's see, is the hydrant free of obstruction? We'll say yes, it is. So if I select no on some of these, what I've done, so is the hydrant free of cracks. So if I say yes, then everything's good. If I say no, I like that I have these conditional forms or these conditional fields that are then going to populate. So I can keep saying the hydrant require repair, yes, and it's going to keep prompting different questions, but if they're not relevant to what's going on, they're not going to clutter up my field crew screen. So I'll say that my hydrant is in service. I don't have any notes to add about it, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to add a signature. Oh, here we go. So I can add it on the web version. So there's my signature to sign off that I inspected it. And what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and save my work order and select complete. So with my work order complete, it's still showing up in my work order list. So what your field crew is going to want to do is trigger a sync. And once this sync is complete, my work order information, as I was updating my status and as I was completing it, is coming back, but this sync is going to remove it from my list. So this, if I finish this one as well, this was the same one. So if I go to this one, it's just going to be the same process, but I'm going to leave that one in progress for now. But it's synced back now to my web version. So I'm going to switch back to my web version and I'm going to select refresh. And so here I can see that I completed my work order and that it has an asset associated and it had a form associated. So I can see which hydrant I inspected, and I can also see my form information. And the form and work order here, completely synonymous. It'd be the same as someone handing you back a sheet of paper, just that digital copy of it. So I've got my form information. And then for your field crew, that wraps up their main workflow component. They're going to be out there in the field receiving these work orders. They're going to be able to say where they are. They're going to be able to use that user interface, which is pretty straightforward, of having very direct options, and then their screen isn't going to be cluttered with a bunch of extra fields, and they're only going to prompt when they have those conditional statements associated with them of if this, then prompt this next question, prompt this next question, but it's not going to be overwhelming for them, and keep it really simple and easy to use. So that's already sent back now, and they don't have to worry about turning anything in later. So I've got my form there. So that was my first user type with the GIS personnel. Next user type was the field crew out there in the field collecting with this. Then I mentioned that there was a third type, which is going to be my utilities director / stakeholder / council members that want to know what's going on in their town, what's going on in their area. And there's a really nice way that we can do that, which is through our dashboards. So another part that I didn't mention about the GIS personnel's workflow component, while they were integrating their existing data in MAP from ArcPro and ArcGIS Online, they also were kind enough, when they were creating this application for the sample hydrants, they also made a dashboard that's going to show information about the hydrants that are associated in this map and also work order information. So if I switch over my dashboard, and this dashboard was created in ArcGIS Online, and then I'm able to bring it in and associate it with my application. So you can make this across the board of all your assets, or you can make it specific, like how I have mine here specific. And what I can see, I know the 900s in the area is a little underwhelming, but if this was a larger data set, that might be a lot more important to have there. It'd be very easy to count these. But if you're working with a large area, a large data set, and you want to know how many am I working with here, very easy to see that. I've also got my hydrant inspection work order status. So I left that one in progress just so that this bar wouldn't be 3. So I've got my in progress ones here and they're completed. And there's a lot of different ways that you can figure these dashboards to show different information. I didn't want to put too many bells and whistles, so it'd be overwhelming, but you could really make it your way, have it how you want it, and show the information that you need to get across. And what I really like about this for your GIS personnel, once they configure this and it's got the settings that you want, they're not having to manually update it. And for a council presentation or stakeholder presentation, you're not having to reinvent the wheel of taking a spreadsheet and how am I going to make this into a pie chart? How am I going to make this into a nice bar chart? It's already existing. So that initial setup time up front is going to save you a lot of time going forward. Once you get it how you like it, it's going to be really easy to maintain. And then I can easily see here that I have all of my hydrants are in service, and everything is looking good. And it's really easy to digest. It's, again, not going through a spreadsheet trying to figure out what is going on. So then I mentioned that the GIS personnel have one more step here. And this is what's going to complete that workflow circle. So once that data comes back in from the field crew, it's really great for your utilities director to see where the crews are. It's great for everyone who wants to know what's going on in the town. But it's also really nice for your GIS personnel who's going to be then incorporating this data back into their geodatabase, or they want to store it somewhere. So what I've done in ArcPro is I've added a new map workspace here, and I've just gone ahead and let's see, let me switch back to, so as I mentioned, when the data initially came from ArcGIS Online into Unity, that was as a web map or a feature service layer, and it's going to come out that same way. So I have my inspections as a feature service layer coming out, and I've got my new hydrants installed as a feature service layer coming out, which I've then been able to incorporate into my map here. And what I've done is for my new hydrants installed, I've just gone ahead and got them so that I have my information here. And what I did was I ran an append tool so that I could add them to my existing master database without having to do anything else. It was really easy to use. And for my non-GIS people on the call, or if you just don't know what that is, that's essentially running a geoprocessing tool that's going to add that information into my master database without duplicating it, and without having to manually type that information in. And then for my hydrant inspections that I've done, those are listed as a related table, and it's a one-to-many relate. So as I mentioned, that asset ID that was the default value in my work order, I have my hydrant here. So this hydrant right here has its hydrant ID, and then all of my work orders are associated, or my inspections are now related to this hydrant as well. So I have this hydrant, and then I can see my inspections that are related with it through this relates table. And it's the same for my non-JS people. That's the same as, think of it, the asset ID and being able to, the asset ID of the hydrant to inspections, almost like a hashtag. So if I do hashtag asset ID or hashtag hydrant ID 123, every time I use that in an inspection or in any kind of fire flow exercise or anything like that, it's gonna relate those hashtags together. So it's always going to pull that information together. So that then once this is all related and I get this information appended, it's then just going to repopulate back into Unity since I've got my data source linked to ArcGIS Online. So that is giving the full complete circle of my GIS personnel's workflow and how they're going to get this information from their desktop to online, integrated into Unity, and then it's sent out to your field crew. Field crew is going to collect that information, going to send back, and then it can be utilized by your GIS personnel after that, or it can be incorporated in dashboard. And that is covering what I have for the workflow component for those three types of users. And now I just want to open up if anyone has any questions. I can go into more details about things. I just wanted to give a pretty big overview of what is happening for each of those user types.
Great, thank you, Daphne. Yeah, anyone feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or send it through the chat window, whichever you prefer. A comment I'll make, and then Daphne, you can expand on. When you made the work order there initially, you showed us just an inspection on one hydrant. Is there any limit to the number, or it's okay to choose multiple hydrants for different or multiple assets per work order? Is that correct?
Yes, so what I can do is I can either use my selection tool here and select a couple, and then it's going to open up my hydrants here, and I could do the same process, or when I create this work order here, I can go and add them from this view as well. So there isn't a limit on it. It can be one asset associated with a work order or multiple.
Great, thank you. What other questions can we answer for you folks today? Great, why don't you, since we've still got a little bit of time, if you want to not create one, but maybe show them kind of where you create your workflows so they can see kind of what that interface looks like. Not all the steps that you do, but just to kind of see kind of the back end under the hood, if you will, of Unity. If any of you are familiar with Unity in the past, there was a lot of what Trimble called professional services where Trimble had to go in and do some customizations, but that's now very available for the user to do themselves. And so everything that Daphne showed you today is kind of out of the box. But
so when I go, so this is where, when I go to this top left-hand menu, I can see my applications, and those are the applications that I've configured for different work order types. And then when I go down to this app builder, there's going to be forms, apps, and workflows. And so the forms and workflows are going to be, the form is going to be the same as that paper work order that was being passed to your field crew. And the workflow is how it's going to get there. When I opened up that, that work order, and it had the inspect option, so I was able to create a workflow that said, I want my field crew to open this work order, and then they're going to select inspect, and then once they're finished with that, they're going to complete it. And that's what that work order workflow template is going to be. So when I go to my application here, and I'm going to open up this sample hydrants that I made, and this is where your GIS personnel is going to be able to configure their application for your work order system. So I have my application titled Sample Hydrants. And then this is where you can select which either web map or feature service layer you want to include to configure for this application. And there isn't, if you use this, so for this example, I used Tobacco Road sample. If I have 5 applications, they can all use that same web map. They can use those same feature layers. It's not going to make a difference. And then I've also, this is how I brought back in my dashboard. I created this in ArcGIS Online, and then was just able to select which one was the one that I needed. And then this is where the workflows come into play. So I have my simple hydrant inspection data collection. So if I edit this, this is how I was able to configure that. I would say that I'm going to start work. I'm going to be able to attach my form here. And then once that's complete, it's going to close that out. So I have these little workflows that are going to tell it what to do. And when you click on this button, so when I click on the inspect button, it's going to automatically prompt this form that I created. So each of these workflow actions are going to allow you to include options for that paper work order, that form. And then once, and you can also, it doesn't need to be one workflow action per form. If I wanted to have 3 different forms associated with this workflow, I could have had them inspect it, perform a fire flow, and if they wanted to do another maintenance to this hydrant, I could have that added as well, and I could just keep adding these forms as needed. So I'm just going to go ahead and save, and then next. And right now, I only have myself shared to this, but what I could do is either select this button to share it to my entire organization, or if this was only relevant to certain users, I could go ahead and just add them and share it. And now that I have Charlotte now shared to this application, what I can do now is assign work orders to her. So before I could only assign them to myself since I was the only user who was able to see it, but now Charlotte can see it as well. And if I want to assign Charlotte a work order, she can do those. And then I'm just going to go ahead and select next and publish to save those changes. There's my application, and then I can see it over here in my apps. And that's how you can go back and view it again. So that's giving a really quick view of how that application was configured for these work orders.
Great, thank you, Daphne. Any other questions anybody'd like to ask before we sign off and let you all get on with your Wednesday? Great, well, thank you very much, Daphne, for putting this together. Great workflow there. And certainly, folks, if you do think of questions afterwards, you will be getting our contact information on the email that will be sent out to you within the next couple of days. You'll be getting that email link. So if you do have questions then, certainly follow up with us and we'll be glad to answer those. But